This is the Murder Castle, a hotel built by H.H. Holmes, America's first known serial killer, and the castle he built just to kill people. It would later be called the Murder Castle. Born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, Holmes wasn't just smart, he was dangerously intelligent. By the age of 25, he was already committing fraud, bigamy, and identity theft. But what he became next, no one saw coming. You see, the roots of his cruel nature started from his very childhood. He had an abusive alcoholic father, and his mother was cold and distant. He was often bullied in school for his intelligence and his peculiar demeanor. Once, his classmates forced him to stand before a skeleton and pressed its hands against his face. Even though it was very traumatic at the moment, Holmes later confessed that this incident triggered in him a morbid curiosity in human anatomy and death. From that moment, he began engaging in disturbing activities like animal torture and dissection. Little did anyone know that these early behaviors would later turn Holmes into America's first ever serial killer. The first of his crimes was a series of insurance scams. He would take out policies on people who didn't even exist, then somehow produce a corpse and claim the payout, as if that was the insured person. In 1886, Mudgett arrived in Chicago and began using a new name, Dr. H.H. Holmes. He got a job at a small neighborhood pharmacy, and before long, people around the area started to trust him. But it didn't take long for things to get strange. The owner of the pharmacy died, and Holmes convinced the widow to sell him the place. Soon after, she disappeared too, without a trace. Using funds gained from a series of cons, he then built his masterpiece, a giant luxurious hotel marketed as the World Fair Hotel. It had hidden passages, fake walls, and trapdoors. Deep within, his basement held chutes, massive leaded glass acid vats, and a cremation kiln capable of reaching up to 3000 degrees. Holmes was meticulous in his planning. He hired and fired multiple contractors to keep the layout of the hotel a secret. It was all for this exact moment. It was 1893. The spectacular World's Columbian Exposition had arrived in Chicago, drawing millions of visitors from across the country. For Holmes, it was the perfect cover, a city overflowing with strangers, noise, and anonymity, and with it, an endless supply of victims. He placed ads in the newspapers, offering jobs to young women, promising room, board, and a fresh start in the big city. Many came alone, full of hope, completely unaware they were walking straight into a slaughterhouse. Inside the castle, though, the rooms were soundproofed. Some had gas lines connected directly to Holmes' office, allowing him to suffocate victims with the turn of a bulb. Others were airtight and locked from the outside. Hidden peepholes let him watch it all. He installed greased chutes behind closet doors so corpses could slide directly to the basement. Down there, they were dismembered, burned in a kiln, or dissolved in acid. You see, this wasn't just random violence. It was planned and calculated. All of Holmes' employees, guests, fiancés, and wives were required to have life insurance policies. Holmes paid the premiums as long as they listed him as the beneficiary. Most of his fiancés and wives would suddenly disappear, as did many of his employees and guests. People in the neighborhood eventually reported that they saw many women enter the castle but never saw them exit. Estimates say Holmes killed anywhere between 9 and 200 people. He'd sent fake reports to the police about burglaries or vagrants in other parts of the city, just to keep them distracted and away from his building. He kept double books, one for room rentals and another, his dark ledger, for disposal fees. All old invoices were shredded or burned after each murder, erasing any link to his victims. Everything was thought through. Every detail had a purpose. He had over 20 aliases, each with a distinct accent, mannerisms, and even wardrobe. Holmes knew the law was closing in, but he had slipped through the cracks before, using bribes, fake identities, and quick getaways across state lines. Still, the man who had so carefully planned every horror was finally brought down by one simple, greedy mistake, a final insurance scam that went horribly wrong. His partner in the scheme was Benjamin Pitezel, a carpenter with a criminal record of his own. Holmes and Pitezel concocted an elaborate scheme. Pitezel would fake his own death for a $10,000 insurance payout, with Holmes providing a cadaver. But Holmes had other plans. On September 4, 1894, he murdered Pitezel himself, knocking him unconscious with chloroform, then setting his body on fire to disfigure it, making it appear as if an explosion had occurred. What followed was even more horrific. Holmes then manipulated Pitezel's unsuspecting wife, Carrie, convincing her that her husband was still alive and hiding in London. He persuaded her to let him take custody of 3 of their 5 children: 13-year-old Alice, 9-year-old Nellie, and 7-year-old Howard. This is where things took an even darker turn. He poisoned 7-year-old Howard in Indianapolis, then dismembered and burned his body in a chimney. Less than 2 weeks later, on October 25, 1894, Holmes murdered Alice and Nellie Pitezel in Toronto. He forced them into a large trunk, locked them inside, and then, using a hose connected to a gas line, asphyxiated them. Their tiny bodies were then buried in the cellar of his rented house. The Pitezel murders were his undoing. Marion Hedgepeth, a convicted outlaw, alerted the authorities when he realized he was cut out of the insurance scam. Pinkerton detectives tracked Holmes for months, eventually catching him in Boston in 1894. In October 1895, Holmes was tried and convicted solely for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel, as it was the clearest case for prosecution. On May 7, 1896, Holmes was hanged at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia. His execution was not swift. The drop didn't break his neck, and witnesses say he twitched and convulsed for over 15 minutes before he was finally pronounced dead. Holmes was so paranoid about what might happen to his body after death that he requested to be buried 10 feet deep in a coffin filled with cement, terrified that grave robbers might dig him up and dissect him, just like he had done to so many others. And yet, ironically, over a century later, in 2017, his grave was exhumed to finally settle a long-standing rumor that he had somehow escaped execution. The tests confirmed it. The body was indeed his. Holmes had not escaped. Holmes once allegedly said,
"I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing."
After his arrest, the infamous murder castle didn't stand for long. It was badly damaged by a fire in 1895 under suspicious circumstances. While parts of it survived for a while, the building was eventually torn down in the 1930s. Today, a US post office stands on its former site, and while the physical structure is gone, some swear that on quiet nights, screams can still be heard beneath the floor.